I will be moderating this conversation with Secretary John Kerry, who is our favorite diplomat at this point because he is the President's special envoy for climate. So we have high hopes of this man to help us solve all of our problems. Now, Secretary Kerry and I used to be neighbors back when he was at the State Department, right across the street from us here at the National Academy. But I didn't think he would remember the first time we ever met, which was decades ago when we were seated next to each other on the former Eastern Airline shuttle that went between Boston and DC. And I was a young faculty member at MIT. I kept looking over at him saying, gosh, this guy looks familiar. And finally, I got up the courage to say, are you a movie star? And he was so gracious with my faux pas because he simply took my hand, shook it, said, hello, I'm John Kerry. I'm your senator. So that grace that he showed that day on the airplane certainly came to the forefront in every other position he's held. His ability to read people and make them feel good about working with him is a rare talent. So now he is just off this historic summit that President Biden convened with many wonderful advances in national plans to control the heat trapping gases from fossil fuels. We'll hear more about that from him, but the first thing I'd like to ask you, Secretary Kerry, is as scientists, what can we do to help you? If there was one question that you would say, science, if you can get me an answer to this, my job would be so easy, what would that be?
Well, Marcia, first of all, I don't know if I was being gracious or I was stupefied and trying to figure out whether it was a compliment or an insult. But anyway, um, we're in a difficult moment. We're really in a tough moment. I don't want to gloss it over in any way whatsoever. We were told by scientists a couple of years ago, the UNFCCC, IPCC, that there are 12 years within which we need to make the most critical decisions to prevent the worst consequences of the climate crisis. And we've now squandered 2.5 of that before the Biden administration came in. And we hear from many people, politicians, scientists, and others, that obviously this is an existential issue. It is for many people right now, and for a lot of people not. But we're not behaving as if it is existential. And I think science, I mean, the scientists gave us this warning, and yet scientists have fallen prey. I know they don't like to be in the crosshairs of politics, nor should they be, but they've fallen prey to a discrediting that has happened to people across society, not just here in America, in other countries too, because there's an anger, there's a cynicism and a frustration at large in the body politic of a lot of countries. And so, we can have people go on TV in the United States still and say, well, there really isn't a scientific consensus about man-made climate, et cetera, and which is just not true. So we're confronting in the United States and in other parts of the world a confrontation with whether or not we can reestablish a baseline of truth in our society, in our politics. And it is critical to us to be able to do that with respect to the climate crisis because the stakes are so high. And yet we see a polarization based on politics, based on exploitation. And frankly, there's also been, I think, a war on science in these last years in America. So if you don't find enough people to fight back against this paid for denial that has taken over our society, there was denial even as to COVID but the denial as to climate has been more persistent and longer, and it's
Mhm.
costing us enormously. So we have to reestablish means. We've lost some of the referees that used to make those judgments because they too have been discredited, i.e., the president of the United States or an anchor on one of our television
Right.
stations. We have to reestablish a baseline of truth, or we can't build consensus in a democracy. And this is a critical component of moving forward. I think back to the role scientists played post World War II in credentialing the efforts to rein in nuclear weaponry. The very
Mhm.
scientists who had created it. We need a reestablishing of a kind of a baseline of credibility here. And I know, as I said, scientists, generally speaking, want to avoid the fray, but we are in a war against denial. We are in a war against facts, against science. And so I think we have to fight back. And I think scientists have to be uh, at the front of that fight because they hold a special place in the hierarchy of our society. Medical scientists particularly have clout right now with respect to getting people persuaded about what they need to do. And so we're in a race against time. We really are. We don't even have
Mhm.
9 years within which to make all these decisions because you've obviously got to implement them. So 2020 to 2030 is a critical decade. And all these people talking about net zero by 2050, that's 30 years away. If we don't do what we need to do between 2020 and 2030, we can't hold the Earth's temperature to 1.5 degrees. We can't achieve net zero by 2050. So this is a critical moment where lots of different previously easily accepted voices of respect in our society have got to reclaim a baseline of truth and reclaim the capacity to build consensus.
Well, I agree with you completely, and that is obviously one of the goals of this summit, is to make sure everyone's clear on the consensus and that there is no doubt but that scientists support it. So let me talk about solutions. Science has been really good to point out the problem, but now we need to turn to solutions. That was the focus of your summit. You set some pretty lofty goals. Do we have all that we need in the way of science, engineering, and innovation to achieve those goals? Or do we need to put science on steroids to get you what you need to be?
Well, the answer is yes. We need to put science on steroids. We need to have the most major commitment to R&D, to innovation, technology.
Mhm.
We've got to find. For instance, we have made major leaps forward in battery capacity. We now have utility scale battery for 4 hours. We have greater capacity. We're exploring hydrogen, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. There are huge possibilities staring us in the face. But the truth is, science tells us that about 50% of the reductions we need to make in emissions are going to come from technologies that we still have not got to scale
Yeah.
or we've not put out there in the marketplace.
Mhm.
But I have an optimism about this. I really believe we're on the cusp of the greatest potential economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution. This is an enormous market. There are 4.5 to 5 billion users today. This market is going to grow. We just heard in the prior session to 10 billion potential users in the next 30 years. So this is a market where already you see banks, asset managers, uh, uh, private equity, different folks moving in that direction. You can't fund a coal-fired power plant in the United States. You can't do it in Europe.
Yeah.
Wish there were more countries where you couldn't do it because right now half the coal-fired power of the world is in China, and China's funding 70% of the coal-fired power around the world. So we've got to rein in coal. I was glad that China stepped forward and said they're going to strictly limit coal now. We have to give that meaning. But this has to happen at an accelerated pace. And I believe as the market moves in that direction, as, for instance, 6 banks just pledged that over the next 10 years, they're going to put $4.16 trillion into this new energy economy. As that happens, it's going to accelerate. And much of the technology is sort of old technology that doesn't lend itself to Moore's law particularly, but we could have a breakthrough. Bill Gates has said we need the breakthrough, we need the miracle of storage or the miracle of fusion or the miracle of fission. I think there are more miracles we might need than just that, but I think they're within the mind's eye. We can contemplate them. We know the direction we have to go in. And I am really confident that as we put the funding in, if we direct our R&D, if we accelerate like a moonshot on steroids, we can get this done and we will get it done. But if we continue as we are today in a sort of business as usual with a polarized nation, divided even over the basic facts and over the science, this is going to be tough. And I think we've got to, be honest about where we are. There is a gap. What I have said to my team working on this, we want to push to go to Glasgow, which is the next UN meeting. And we want to push with high ambition, try to keep 1.5 degrees alive, and try to set a target for how we get to 2050 net zero with specificity, certainly for the 20 largest economies of the planet that equal 81% of all the emissions. So if we can get them moving, the rest will follow. And I believe that we can do that, but Glasgow is a critical moment for us to get on track in order to be able to accomplish our goals. It's doable, absolutely doable. But I also have said to our team, we need to be honest with people that there is a gap still. We could get to 85%, maybe 90% renewable based and still take care of base load and heat our homes and not worry about brownouts or blackouts. But that last 10 to 15% remains complicated still. I think there are plenty of ways to close that gap, potentially even, you have to keep alive the possibility even of the 4th generation modular nuclear or something. We just have to have an all of the above attitude and go after it with a vengeance.
No. Well, your comments remind me, Secretary Kerry, about the old statement that the Stone Age didn't end because they ran out of stones. And the carbon age is not going to end because we run out of coal and fossil fuels, but it's going to end because we've got a better idea. And if you don't jump on board with the better idea, you're going to be the Neanderthals of the carbon age.
And that was spoken by the oil minister of Saudi Arabia.
Wow. Fabulous.
Just to put it in perspective.
Okay. Well, Secretary Kerry, you have been so generous with your time. I love your insights. As I say, you're our guy now for policy with climate change. And please understand.
President Biden is the man on this. And,
right. Of course he is, but he's doing. Yeah, but he's been doing a million things, whereas this is your day job. So we really appreciate you taking it on. And please know that the National Academy of Sciences, right across the street from your former office, is here ready to help you with anything you need to make your job easier. So be sure to call on us.
We need you in the fight, big.
All right, thank you. So now I'm just going to do a quick, thank you again, a quick wrap up of today's activities. So we heard from so many distinguished people from academia, from industry, from policy. If there is one theme that I want to pull out of today's discussions, it was connections. We're all connected economically. We're also connected through the environment, and we're connected in a One Health manner. We've seen from this pandemic that it moved from animal populations to human populations, and then exploded all over the globe. And we're connected socially as well. We won't solve these problems until we solve them everywhere. But we have to keep trying, and it is summits like this that allow us to all understand the connections that we all have and how these connections can both make us stronger, but also mean that any one person making a unilateral decision in one place will affect everyone else.